In Ibadan, Nigeria, two brothers shared the same house but lived very different lives. Connell, the elder, had a well-paying bank job. Every morning he left the house in neatly ironed suits, holding his briefcase with pride. The younger brother, Taye, had just finished university but could not find any work. While Connell's life looked bright, Taye's days were filled with silence, searching for opportunities that never came. At the dinner table, Connell made jokes that cut deep. He would laugh and say, "A man without a job is not a man at all." The words were sharp, and each time they sank deeper into Taye's heart. Their parents didn't stop Connell. Instead, they began comparing the two brothers. "Why can't you be more like your elder brother?" they would say, their voices heavy with disappointment. Taye sat quietly, pretending not to care, but inside he felt broken. He wanted to shout that he was trying, that life wasn't easy, but no one listened. The more Connell mocked, the more the family praised him, and the more invisible Taye became. Even small family moments turned into reminders of his failure. When Connell showed off his new phone or expensive watch, the parents clapped with pride, while Taye lowered his eyes to hide his shame. At night, when everyone else was asleep, Taye lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if his life would always be this way, mocked, compared, and unloved. The family house in Ibadan was full that weekend. Uncles, aunties, cousins, and neighbors had gathered for a celebration. The room was alive with laughter, food, and music. Everyone was dressed in bright clothes, sharing stories of success, jobs, businesses, and dreams. But for Taye, the youngest son, the joy around him felt heavy. He sat quietly in the corner, trying to blend in, hoping no one would ask about his life. Connell, his elder brother, was at the center of attention as always. He wore a shiny new suit and spoke loudly about his bank job, his new car loan, and how the managers at his office trusted him. The relatives nodded proudly. Their parents beamed, showing him off like a trophy. But then, the moment that would change everything happened. With a smirk, Connell raised his glass and said in front of everyone, "If you ever need free labor, call my brother. He's an expert in doing nothing." The words hit like a knife. The room erupted with laughter. Some clapped, others shook their heads as if agreeing. Even their parents chuckled awkwardly, not stopping the insult. Taye felt his chest tighten. His palms grew sweaty. He tried to smile faintly, but inside his heart shattered. The shame was unbearable. His cousins whispered, his uncles shook their heads, and he felt like every eye in the room was staring at him, labeling him useless. He excused himself quietly and stepped outside. The cool night breeze brushed against his face, but it couldn't cool the fire of pain burning inside. He walked down the street alone, blinking back tears, but when he finally reached a quiet corner, he broke down. His body shook as he cried into his hands. All the years of struggle, all the mocking words, all the comparisons came crashing down in that moment. But in the middle of his tears, something inside him shifted. He whispered to himself, "This cannot be my story. I will not remain like this." For the first time, his pain turned into fuel. He looked up at the night sky, stars shining faintly above Ibadan, and made a silent vow. One day he would rise so high that the same people laughing at him would be left speechless. That night, Taye went home quietly, no one noticing the storm inside him. But in his heart, a seed had been planted. A seed of determination, of hunger, of quiet revenge. Not with anger but with success. The breaking point had come, and from that moment forward, he knew life would never be the same. One evening, as Taye sat in the small cybercafe clicking through his emails, a message popped up that made his heart race. A startup company from Rwanda had seen one of his freelance projects online. They were impressed by his clean design and quick delivery. The email read, "We would like to collaborate with you on a bigger project." Taye blinked at the screen, hardly believing it was real. For the first time, someone outside his world noticed his talent. He replied immediately, nervous but excited. Days later, he was on video calls with professionals who respected his ideas and valued his skills. They treated him not as the jobless boy, but as a partner. It was a feeling he had never experienced before. Within weeks, he delivered his first big project, and payment arrived in his account, an amount larger than anything he had ever earned before. Taye stared at the notification on his phone, his hands shaking. He whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning." With the money, he didn't rush to buy new clothes or show off. Instead, he reinvested it. He bought better software, rented extra hours at the cafe, and slowly began building a small team of other young freelancers. Together, they created digital solutions for businesses, websites, apps, and marketing tools. What started as sleepless nights alone had now turned into something bigger. His very own team, working under his guidance. Home no one knew. Connell still walked around proudly, mocking Taye for doing nothing. Their parents sighed whenever Connell spoke of promotions and bonuses, comparing Taye's silence to Connell's noise. But Taye kept quiet, hiding his growing success like a precious secret. He didn't want to reveal it too soon. He wanted the right moment, the moment that would silence every laugh, every insult, every word of doubt. The money kept coming little by little, then more steadily. Taye could finally afford things he once only dreamed of. But he controlled himself, avoiding any flashy purchases. He wore the same simple clothes, ate the same meals, and walked the same streets. To the world, he was still the jobless brother. But inside, he carried a secret fire, a truth so powerful it made him smile at night when no one was watching. Every payment notification felt like proof that his struggles had not been in vain. Every successful project felt like a brick building the empire he once only imagined. For the first time he felt the taste of victory, not loud, not showy, but deep, steady, and unshakable. He promised himself he would keep working in silence until the day came when his success would speak louder than Connell's mocking words. And when that day came, the shock would not just belong to his brother, it would belong to the entire family. Connell's life, once full of shine, slowly began to fall apart. First, nobody noticed. He still left the house in his polished suits, still spoke loudly about his job at the bank, and still carried himself like a man above everyone else. But behind closed doors, trouble was growing. The car loan he had taken became too heavy to handle. His credit card bills kept piling up. He borrowed money from friends, from relatives, even from colleagues, just to maintain the image he had built. At work, things went from bad to worse. Connell had always relied more on his charm than on his skills, but charm couldn't save him forever. When a scandal broke out in his office involving missing funds, his name was caught in the middle. He tried to defend himself, but his bosses had already lost their patience. One morning he was called into the manager's office and told coldly, "You're fired." Just like that, the life he bragged about crumbled in front of him. He returned home, but he didn't tell the family the truth right away. For weeks, he pretended to still be employed, dressing up and leaving the house as if he was going to work. But the lies couldn't last forever. His car was taken by the bank, his debts grew, and the phone calls from creditors came almost every day. Slowly, everyone began to see the cracks in his perfect life. Yet, even in his downfall, Connell's pride refused to die. At the dinner table, he still looked at Taye and mocked him. One evening, with a bitter laugh, he said, "At least I once had a job. You'll never know what success feels like." The words were sharp, full of arrogance, but they also carried the pain of a man drowning in failure. Taye listened quietly, not saying a word. His heart ached, not from the insult, but from the irony. He had already built something stronger than Connell ever imagined. He had money in his account, clients across countries, and a team looking up to him. He had success in his hands, but he kept it hidden, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. It wasn't easy for him to stay silent. Sometimes he wanted to shout, to tell everyone that he was no longer jobless. But instead he controlled himself. He knew Connell's downfall was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning of a bigger lesson life was preparing. At night, when Connell tossed and turned, worried about debts and shame, Taye sat in his room working on new projects, his laptop glowing in the dark. He was living in silence, but his silence was powerful. Because deep inside, he knew a day was coming when the tables would turn, and Connell would see with his own eyes what real success looked like. Months passed, and Connell's life kept sinking deeper. After losing his bank job and drowning in debt, he grew desperate. His pride was gone, but he still needed to survive. When he heard about an opening at a fast-rising tech company in Lagos, he grabbed the chance. The job promised stability and respect, something he badly needed to rebuild his image. On the morning of the interview, Connell dressed in his best suit, carefully polished his shoes, and rehearsed his answers in front of the mirror. "This is my new beginning," he whispered to himself. He walked into the company's tall glass building, his heart beating with nervous hope. When he entered the boardroom, the atmosphere was professional and serious. Several executives sat at the long table. Connell straightened his back, forced a confident smile, and prepared to introduce himself. But then his eyes moved to the head of the table, and his entire world collapsed. Sitting there in a sharp, tailored suit, calm and confident, was Taye, his younger brother. The same brother he had mocked for years, the same brother he had called jobless. Connell's face went pale. His hands grew cold. The room froze as everyone sensed the tension between them. For a long second nobody moved. Then Taye leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but powerful. "Welcome to your interview." The words hit Connell harder than any insult he had ever thrown. His throat went dry. He tried to smile, but it looked weak and broken. Memories of every cruel joke he had made against Taye came rushing back to him like waves. He could almost hear his own voice from the past. A man without a job is not a man at all. Now, here he was, sitting in front of the very man he had belittled. Only this time Taye held the power. Connell stammered as he greeted the panel, but his voice shook. The confidence he had practiced in front of the mirror was gone. He could feel every eye on him, waiting to see how he would face the brother he once humiliated. Taye, on the other hand, remained composed. His silence spoke louder than words. He didn't need to remind Connell of the past. Just being there in that seat was enough. The interview continued, but the atmosphere never returned to normal. Connell answered questions, but his words lacked strength. Inside he was crumbling. He realized that the tables had turned completely. The brother he once laughed at now held his career, and his pride in his hands. For Connell, it was the most shocking moment of his life. For Taye, it was the moment he had quietly worked for. The moment when silence and hard work finally spoke louder than all the insults in the world. The boardroom in Lagos was bright and filled with quiet tension. Connell walked in wearing his best suit, his shoulders squared, his smile wide. He wanted to show confidence, even though deep inside he felt nervous. This interview was his chance to start again after losing his bank job. He looked around the room, trying to impress the panel with his charm, until his eyes landed on the man sitting at the head of the table. His smile froze. It was Taye. Connell blinked, thinking it was a trick of his eyes. But no. His younger brother, the same one he had mocked for years, was sitting there as the CEO of the company. The room felt colder, his palms started to sweat, but he forced a grin. "Well, this should be interesting," he muttered to himself, trying not to break. The interview began. At first, Connell tried to carry himself with his usual pride, answering questions with big words and flashy confidence. But the panel wasn't impressed. They asked deeper questions about business strategy, technology, problem-solving, things Connell had no real knowledge of. He stumbled, trying to cover his gaps with fake smiles and half-answers. All the while, Taye sat calmly watching. He didn't mock him, didn't interrupt, didn't remind him of the past. He simply let the questions do the work. And soon, the truth became clear to everyone in the room. Connell wasn't as skilled as he had always claimed to be. His arrogance began to crumble. His voice shook. He avoided eye contact. The panel exchanged glances. They could see it. The man who once boasted about being the successful brother was struggling in front of them. And sitting across from him, steady and confident, was the very brother he used to call useless. Connell felt the weight of humiliation pressing down on him. For the first time, he understood what it felt like to be on the other side of the laughter. His heart pounded as he realized that his future, his career, his dignity, all of it, was now in the hands of the brother he had ridiculed. When the interview ended, silence filled the room. Connell's fake smile had completely vanished. His hands trembled slightly as he gathered his papers. He didn't dare look around because he could feel the judgment in everyone's eyes. He finally lifted his gaze toward Taye, but instead of mockery, he saw calm strength in his younger brother's eyes. That was the power shift. It wasn't just about who had the job, who wore the suit, or who earned the money. It was about respect. And in that moment, everyone in the room understood the truth. The balance between the brothers had changed forever. Connell had once laughed at Taye's pain, but now his own pride had collapsed in front of the world. The boardroom had emptied, but Connell couldn't leave. His chest felt heavy, his mind spinning with disbelief. Just hours ago he had walked in full of pride, expecting to impress everyone. Now his world had been turned upside down. His own younger brother, the one he had mocked for years, was the CEO, sitting in the seat of power he could never reach. Connell followed Taye into a private office, closing the door behind them. His voice cracked as he spoke. "You? My boss? Impossible. Tell me this is some kind of joke." His eyes were wide, searching for a lie, a trick, something to make it all untrue. But Taye didn't flinch. He sat calmly at his desk, looking at Connell with a steady gaze. Connell's hand shook. He tried to hold on to his pride, but the weight of reality broke him. Tears filled his eyes as he whispered, How did this happen? I spent years laughing at you. I told everyone you were useless. I made you feel small. And now, look at me." His voice broke completely, and he covered his face with his hands. For a long moment Taye was silent. He remembered every night of pain, every insult at the dinner table, every time he was made to feel invisible. He stood up slowly and walked closer. "You mocked my pain," he said softly, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But pain made me stronger. Every insult you threw at me became fuel. Every time you laughed at me, I worked harder. Every time you called me useless, I built something you could not see." Connell dropped his hands, his face wet with tears. He shook his head, struggling to believe what he was hearing. I never imagined you could be the one." Taye's eyes grew sharper, but his tone remained calm. "That's the problem. You never imagined because you never respected me. You were too busy showing off your suits, your car, your job. You forgot that life can change. You forgot that the person you mock today may be the person you kneel before tomorrow." Connell's knees weakened, and he slumped into a chair. His pride, his arrogance, all of it had crumbled. He looked at his younger brother not as the jobless boy, but as a man who had risen from the ashes. For the first time, silence filled the space between them, not the silence of mockery, but the silence of truth. And in that silence, Connell realized he had lost something far greater than a job. He had lost the respect of the brother he once humiliated, and that loss cut deeper than anything else. The news spread like wildfire. Within days, the whole family knew the truth. Taye, the quiet brother they once pitied, was now the CEO of a fast-rising tech company. Relatives who had once laughed at him, who whispered about his jobless life during family gatherings, suddenly began to praise him. Their tone changed overnight. "Ah, that boy is brilliant," one uncle said proudly. "We always knew he was destined for greatness," another auntie claimed, forgetting how she once joined in Connell's laughter. Cousins who used to avoid sitting near him now sent him messages, asking for advice, hoping for opportunities. The same mouths that once mocked his silence now spoke his name with respect. Everywhere he went, people looked at him differently, not as the boy with no job, but as a man who had built something powerful from nothing. Home, the shift was even heavier. Their parents, who had always compared him to Connell, could no longer hide their shock. The father, who once sighed at the dinner table and said, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" now struggled to meet Taye's eyes. The mother, who often sided with Connell's pride, sat in silence, realizing how unfair she had been. One evening, with tears in her eyes, she finally admitted, "We were wrong, Taye. We didn't see you. We didn't believe in you. But you proved us all wrong." For Taye, it was a bittersweet moment. The respect he had longed for was finally his, but it came only after years of pain and loneliness. He accepted their words with humility, but deep inside, he could not forget how they had all turned their backs when he needed them most. Connell, once the golden child of the family, now stood quietly in the background. He no longer bragged, no longer mocked, no longer held the attention of relatives. Every eye that once admired him now looked past him and toward Taye. For the first time in his life, he felt small, standing in the shadow of the brother he had belittled. At a family dinner, the shift became clear. Relatives sat around the table, showering Taye with questions about his company, his projects, his future plans. He answered calmly, his confidence glowing in every word. Connell sat silently, pushing food around his plate, his chest heavy with regret. When one cousin asked him, "So, Connell, what are you doing these days?" The question felt like a dagger. He forced a weak smile but had no real answer. The room that once rang with laughter at Taye's expense was now filled with admiration for him. And in that moment, everyone realized the truth. The tables had turned completely. The brother they once mocked was now the pride of the family, and the brother they once praised was left humbled, learning the hardest lesson of his life. The hall was decorated with bright lights. Music filled the air, and laughter echoed as the company celebrated its end-of-year gala. Employees, partners, and guests filled the room, dressed in their best. At the center of it all stood Taye, the young CEO who had risen from nothing to build something powerful. As he walked to the stage, the room fell silent, waiting for his words. He looked around, his eyes scanning the crowd, and then he spoke with a steady voice. "Never despise humble beginnings," he said. "The person you mock today may be the one you'll answer to tomorrow." His words carried weight, each sentence striking deep into the hearts of those listening. He wasn't just talking about business, he was talking about life, about pain, about the journey that had brought him here. The audience erupted into applause, people rising to their feet, clapping and cheering for him. Some even had tears in their eyes, inspired by the truth in his message. For them, Taye wasn't just a CEO. He was proof that strength can grow from struggle, and success can rise from shame. At one of the tables, Connell sat quietly, his head lowered, his heart heavy. The brother he once mocked, the brother he had called useless, was now the man standing tall on the stage, respected by all. For Connell, it was a painful reminder that pride without humility leads to a fall. But for Taye, it was victory, not a loud, boastful victory, but one filled with dignity. He was no longer the jobless brother. He was the boss, the leader, the man who turned betrayal into strength and pain into power. And in that moment, he finally stood taller than ever before.